Hello. So I'm joined right now, I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Azarias Reda, who is the Chief Technology Officer for the Republican National Committee. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So before you became the CTO, you were the RNC's first Chief Digital Data Officer, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So what has changed in your role moving from Chief Data Officer to being the CTO?
So last year, or last cycle in 2014, when we started working on what we need to do to support campaigns across the country, coming off from the 2012 cycle and trying to understand what ways technology data can help, we realized we need to spend a lot of time on technology, on data, on analytics. So we had an incubator that we created that was a container for all the three things that we were doing. So it was one combined area where we have digital operations, technology operations, data operations. And what we learned last year was this is a bigger operation, and we grew to about 50 people within the RNC, the incubator that we had, and we're growing even further. So at this point, we needed to kind of break down our roles and focus on technology on one part while still having other people lead the other areas.
Before we go into more of the questions, I do want to remind everybody to continue tweeting your questions with the hashtag #DigitalBeltway, and if we have time, we'll try to answer some of those later. So you basically, built out this big team, and then said this needs to be a bigger part of our organization going forward. So, there's been this perception, and it's, I guess, really been the case probably since the 2008 election, that the left does tech better. How do you respond to that, and why do you think that perception exists?
So I think it's kind of interesting to see maybe why that came by and why the RNC actually has an interesting insight on this. So if you look at campaigns or the life cycle of campaigns, unless you are a presidential campaign or, in fact, a re-election campaign for a presidential candidate, they're very short operations, 6 months, a year. You don't hardly have enough time or the resources to build sophisticated tools, which kind of makes somebody like the RNC very important because we're around all year long. We can amortize the cost of building these things across multiple campaigns as well as across a long period of time, and we're also able to coordinate with campaigns directly. So what you have had is, over the years, the RNC had been known to have started collecting data. I would say, we have started first and have been collecting a lot of data, but at some point in the post the 2004 cycle,
right.
There wasn't a lot of work done to make that data actionable and usable by campaigns, while on the left there was a lot of effort to kind of make up for the loss that happened before. So, but nothing like a loss to kind of get people interested in working on this thing and getting ready on this. So that's how we end up spending a lot of time in the 2014 cycle on it.
Right. Do you think you guys started early enough?
I think so. I mean, for the 2014 cycle, it was important for us because it was a good way to learn what we need to do for the 2016 cycle. So we took all the resource that we had over the years and just thought about, okay, just how can we play on our strengths? If we're the RNC, we are the national party. We can work with all campaigns, and we have been collecting data for 20 years before. So what are the best ways that we can do? And there's a lot to do, but I think we have been pretty helpful to a number of Senate races, a number of congressional races last year, which has kind of built the foundation for what we're trying to do for the 2016 cycle.
So what are you trying to do? What are some of your plans, and what are some of the tools that you're building that you've learned from 2014 going into 2016?
So I think that a couple of key areas were trying to understand how campaigns work and what they need and what they can use, because there's a lot that we can do. So it all starts around the voter data. And if you're a for-profit company, you care about the consumers that you have and the customer data. For us, it's all about the voter data and what we can do to enhance what campaigns can use. So we start from collecting voter information from across the country. There is no central location where you can get the national voter file. You have to go build it one state at a time, and as you imagine, every state has different ways they do it. And then this is not something that you do like once a cycle or twice a cycle and stop, because the voter file, the voter data is changing all the time. People turn 18, they can register, they move, they do a lot of things.
And that was one of the problems in both 2008 and 2012, wasn't it? You had a lot of data, but it wasn't maybe actionable to use one of your terms.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting on on a sea of data. If people can't access it, do so in real time or close to real time, and be able to make decision based on that. So the idea is, one, how do we make updating the data much more frequent? How do we enhance the data? Because voting is just one of multiple things that people do. That's not
Right.
So in order to understand voting behavior, you need to understand what other things people care about. So you have to have a process for enhancing the data from other sources that you can get, in order to build a much a fuller profile of who the voter is, and hence how they are going to behave, or how you can predict some of that, how you can message to them, how you can persuade them, how you can get them out to vote. So this all comes around building a better profile about individuals and understanding who they are.
And then once you have that information, how are you making that available to the campaigns, and how can they build their own tools, I guess, on top of that information, so that they can take action with that once it comes down to their individual campaigns, or even the big presidential run-up for things?
Yeah, so typically what you've had over the years is you might have a campaign data person or a campaign manager says, well, we need voters in this particular county or this particular state, and they might have gotten a big file, a big CSV file that was shipped to them with a whole bunch of data points, and they have to sort through, deal with it, and decide how they are going to act upon it. As you know, this does not scale, especially if you're talking about maybe a state level or even a national level campaign. So the first step in that process was trying to coalesce and connect data points from multiple sources. So you have voter data, you have donors, you have people who attend events, you have people that we interact with on social media or in our email marketing campaign. So the first step is to combine it in a place where people can have one place to get it, so they don't have to do the connection there on their own. And then building a layer on top of this to make this very accessible. One, you have one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing last year was building a set of APIs that allow application developers, both within the campaign as well as within the ecosystem, the Republican ecosystem, to take advantage of what the RNC has been doing for a long time. And that remains to be a key part of how we make our data accessible. But at the same time, we also realize that not every campaign has engineers to work on apps for them, or can afford to buy one. So we build a lot of tools on top of our data as well, where they can go explore our data. They can export data to other tools, tools for doing canvassing when people go out walking in a neighborhood, so that they get the latest information that we have on voters, as well as the analytics. So it's a combination of raw data that you can get if you're doing analytics, API level structured data that you can use if you have the capacity to build application on top of this, or a bunch of tools and direct applications that you can use right away. And this is built for various levels of sophistication within the campaign.
Now, are you planning on making some of these tools available to the grassroots, or is this just really available to kind of the campaign operatives or people directly involved with the RNC?
So the thing about the RNC is, as a national party, we support everybody who is running on a general campaign with an R behind their name, right? So that's a very, very big pool.
Right.
And we can't always directly work with everyone that we like to. So the way we go about this is, we open up our platform for, if you are working with maybe vendors, or if maybe you have your own people that can take advantage of this, the tools can scale out. The one-on-one interaction might not scale out.
Right.
But then once we start working with them, for them, a lot of the tools are used to work with the grassroots. So they're the volunteer base in their field offices, whether they're making phone calls or they're making door knocks, etc. They can use some of the tools, or tools built by other people.
So let's talk a little bit about social media outreach. The age of the average voter, for the RNC is a little bit older, maybe not as engaged as the average age of on the other side. But how do you guys see social media? Because there's been a lot of conversation about how that really led to 2012, the election in 2012, and kind of the social media outreach there. What are your plans when it comes to using data and social media to get out the vote for the various 2016 campaigns? Yeah,
so I think of it from a way of sampling. How can we get real-time access to information or to data about individuals and what they're thinking? So if you think about how we do modeling, how we do analytics right now, you start from a as rich a profile as you can about an individual, but then we try to append it with information, with real-time information about what they're thinking today. So and when you compare analytics in politics to maybe analytics in a company, like in a company like Netflix that needs to understand what movies people like, usually based on fairly, yes, your taste might change over time, but not as quickly as, when a campaign is going on and hundreds of millions of dollars is getting spent to change people's behavior. So we really need to understand or have a grip on real-time people behavior, and the traditional way to do this has been to do a lot of field research, or it's a little different than polls, but basically go out and talk to people, call them on their phone or maybe on their cell phones and ask them a bunch of questions and get data back. And you can do so fairly smartly if you can sample a population.
Right.
Now, the way we see social media is kind of replacing our data in problem, where instead of having to call 1,000 people or 20,000 people to get a good sample, now if we can start combining what we're learning from what people are saying on social media, we're able to start appending. And this is not an easy problem, because what that requires is being able to match identities online to offline, which is a fairly hard problem. But to the extent that you can do it, it really becomes a very good source of data that can be used in your analytics. So sort of how we're planning on using information and data from social media is enabling us to inform our analytics, our modeling, based on the match we're able to make.
So that actually that leads into my next question. You're talking about kind of the analytics. How do you split your focus between looking at this back end analytics, but also looking at kind of the front end social mechanics of actually then getting out the vote and encouraging voters to get out there? How do you split your focus between those 2 points?
Yes, actually, comes down to why we had to split even our operation 3 ways. So we have 3 divisions now that look at this: data engineering and digital. So data focuses on collecting, enhancing this data, doing analytics. Engineering is sort of the service layer that connects them. But then we have an entire separate division that is more about taking this information and data and engaging voters in the various ways, in wherever you are. And as you know, like, we have fairly diverse, especially when you look at people's, or the mechanism by which you can reach people. We have to be on the mail, we have to be on the phone, we have to be on social media, we have to be on email, we have to be on a number of different avenues where we can reach people. And what we have is we kind of separate the concerns, where people can just take the analytics, the set of people, the universe of people that maybe have a common behavior. Maybe they care about a certain issue, or maybe you can reach them a certain way. And then we have a set of people that think about how do you message to them, how do you reach them in the media and the platform that they're already spending time on.
And what have you learned, I guess, from the 2014 from the midterms? What have you learned from that you plan on taking with you, into 2016? So
I think the biggest lesson has been a lot of the team that we end up building came from outside of politics. And like, I was running a startup in Austin before I joined the RNC last year, and not a lot of people wake up and say, hey, I'm going to join the RNC technology shop.
I was going to say, what appealed to you about it?
So, looking into what happened in 2012, as you mentioned, right, and the interest and the appetite there was from the Republican Party, the RNC in particular, to essentially build out an infrastructure, build out a team to tackle this problem head on, rather than saying, hey, we have done better, or like, this is just the results. There was a lot of interest in going to the root of the problem and start building out infrastructure around it. And I've seen a lot of people this year. You probably noticed a lot of people are moving from tech sector, private sector, to maybe the government or public service area. And for me, that was that came about 1.5 years ago. And I was like, well, this is something that I can apply my skill sets, my background, but have a lot of impact. And that's kind of what my job last year really just had been around recruiting, is going around the country and talking to people, college students and folks in the tech industry, to come join us, because it's really an interesting place where you can have an outsized impact on the American democracy while applying your set of skills. So a lot of the lessons for us was but it does take some domain expertise, and you need to learn a lot of things. So and I would say the biggest lesson has been, how do you take someone who is working for a startup in Austin or in Silicon Valley or in Washington D.C. And ramp them up in the political sphere, whether it's for analytics, for tools, or the kind of customer that we have to deal with, so that we can be as effective as possible. So what we're going to do this year is basically take those lessons and build out even a bigger team, but have a better mechanics on how we deal with campaigns and how we ramp up people to be productive.
Well, awesome. Well, that wraps up my questions, and we are now out of time, but I really appreciate you talking about this, and I think it's actually, frankly, I'm surprised and impressed with the data strategies that the RNC has in place. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.